Today on The Conservative Rebel, as DOGE ramps up its war against government corruption, the leftist media launches a campaign of propaganda and emotional blackmail to try to convince us that cutting government waste and fraud is somehow a bad thing. Wait until you hear the tragic sob stories about all the poor little doe-eyed bureaucrats who will have to find a job doing something other than wasting your money. They're not for the faint of heart. Meanwhile, leftists are claiming that since Elon Musk wasn't directly elected, he's a tyrant for trying to save you money. Just a few years ago, these same people sang the praises of unelected bureaucrats like Anthony Fauci when they demanded that everyone inject themselves with an experimental drug and censored, shamed, or destroyed the careers of millions of people for objecting to it. Apparently, the Constitution lets government employees do all that and anything else they want, unless that thing is saving taxpayers' money. Then they suddenly become tyrants. You're listening to The Conservative Rebel. Whenever they're up for election, Republicans always shower voters with empty promises to cut government spending. Those promises, of course, are rarely kept. Instead of giving you results, they give you excuses. Almost every Republican congressman and president for the past century has been this way, either so corrupt and two-faced that they stab their voters in the back the second they get to D.C., or so weak that they always compromise with the left. Then they're surprised when their voters replace them with Democrats who turn out to be even more determined to bankrupt the country than they were. The cycle continues election after election as both parties keep spending money like drunken sailors. This is how the uniparty works, and it's why we're here in 2025 with $36 trillion in debt and a currency that's quickly losing its value. Big round of applause for all the rhino losers who got us here. Great job, everyone. But unfortunately for the enemies of our civilization, the second Trump administration isn't playing that game. This time, Trump and his team are dead serious about eliminating government waste and holding the bureaucracy accountable to the people. In just over a month, Trump, Elon Musk, and the Department of Government Efficiency have exposed multiple major government scandals. For example, how Politico was funded by the government and how the government paid for luxury hotels for criminal aliens in New York. They've exposed scandals. Not only that, they've also fired around 30,000 useless bureaucrats. This is an administration that, when it says it's going to cut spending, when it says it's going to fight corruption in government, it actually means it. And what's more, over the weekend, Trump posted on Truth Social saying he wanted Musk to get even more aggressive in his war against deep state corruption. And that's precisely what Elon Musk did. On Saturday afternoon, every federal employee in the country received an email asking for them to list 5 things they did last week. It wasn't some insane, irrational, unreasonable request. It wasn't some crazy expectation that Elon Musk had for these people like the media would want you to believe. It was simply asking them to list one thing they did each of the 5 days of the work week. That was it. Should take 5 minutes, you send the email, you're done. If you're actually productive, if you're actually accomplishing something while you're being paid by the taxpayers your fine salary, then you would be 100% fine. But Elon Musk made clear that if that wasn't the case, if you were not working, if you could not provide a list of 5 things you did that week, it would be taken as a resignation. And of course, there's this massive battle going on right now over that email, probably legal challenges, heads of various departments asking their employees not to respond to the email, so we'll see how that plays out. But the reason that I bring it up is because it just goes to show that Elon Musk, Doge, and Trump, they truly do care about reducing government spending. They want to do it, and they're serious about doing it. And every sane American agrees with them. What sane American would not want to cut government waste? If you were to do a poll of Americans and you asked them, do you think the government should waste the money it steals from you? How many of them do you think would say, yes, I think it should waste my money. I think government waste is good, and what's more, I think you're a fascist for disagreeing with me. How many do you think would say that? And we actually don't have to guess about the numbers here, because according to a new Harvard-Harris poll, which actually asked respondents for opinions on a variety of different political issues, 76%, or more than 3/4 of respondents, support DOGE's efforts to cut government spending, which means that according to this poll, cutting government waste is even more popular than banning men from women's sports. Only 69% supported that. So that means that not only do 100% of sane people support cutting government waste, on top of that, even some clinically insane people still support cutting government waste as well. Even some of those people have seen the light on this one issue. Why? Because it's just that glaringly obvious that we have a serious problem on our hands that demands serious action. It's that glaringly obvious that this rampant spending, this insane spending, needs to stop before our country is bankrupted. So the vast majority of Americans support DOGE's work. Most Americans know that Trump and Musk's war against government waste is both morally righteous and financially necessary. And that, of course, means that the media has a big problem on its hands. They have to try to find a way to convince millions of Americans that cutting government waste and corruption is somehow a bad thing. That having less of their paychecks stolen from them is a bad thing. That firing bureaucrats, that the government not going bankrupt is a bad thing. And they know that there's no sane argument in favor of their position. They know that they can't win a logical debate on this issue. So they've decided, of course, to resort to their tried and true tactic of fear and emotional manipulation. They don't want people to think about and consider this issue because they know they'll lose anyone who does. So they want to use emotional blackmail and propaganda to shut down any logical consideration of what's going on. And there are two main narratives they're pushing to do that, the stupid one and the stupidest one. We'll start with the stupid one, and that, of course, is the narrative that Elon Musk is some callous, heartless, whip-cracking slave driver who's cruelly destroying the careers of innocent people. All of these people who are losing their jobs, we're supposed to feel very, very, very sorry for them. We're supposed to feel absolutely terrible about the fact that bureaucrats are losing their jobs because of Elon Musk's Doge. One of my favorite examples came from CBS, just to show you kind of what I'm talking about, when it told the sad story of one fired VA bureaucrat who said this, quote, "The idea that the federal workforce is too bloated feels like a scapegoat more than anything else. Nobody joins the federal government to get rich." It turns out, this fired bureaucrat tells us, everyone who's ever joined the federal government is a completely selfless, generous, wonderful Mother Teresa type with a little halo floating over their head. None of them have ever cared about money or power or anything like that, ever in all of history. All they ever want to do is to diligently serve the public. They're completely selfless, that's it. Which actually makes perfect sense if you stop to think about it. That must be why politicians have always been renowned for their honesty and integrity and humility and decency and morality. Because I've always wondered about that. That's always been a bit of a head-scratcher for me. I've always wondered, why does everyone admire politicians so much? And now I know the answer. Because they're as close to moral perfection as anyone on Earth can ever get. And because they're all so great, that's why there's that famous quote that power purifies you morally, and absolute power purifies absolutely. You're around all those great influences when you're in power, all your fellow politicians, so you can't help improving yourself. And that's why you hear so many people across the political spectrum gushing about how wonderful politicians are. Almost as much as they gush about how much they love lawyers, which is another thing you'll hear a lot. I mean, you'll hear people talking about this everywhere you go. Whenever I talk to people about any social problem, you know what they always do? They turn and they look at me with a smile and a wistful glimmer in their eyes, and they'll sigh, "If only people could be more like politicians, then the world would be a better place." And then I'll turn to them with teary eyes and I'll say, "If only." I get emotional just thinking about it. So that's one especially ludicrous example, a VA bureaucrat claiming that no one ever joins the federal government to get rich. And that's essentially what the media is going with. They're going with all of these people who are being fired are great people, wonderful people. It's terrible that they're losing their jobs and all of this. And as another example of what I'm talking about, take a listen to this clip from a video that MSNBC put out recently.
I oversaw cybersecurity for the VA.gov websites, and about a third of USDS, including me, were fired last week.
I got into this job because I'm not in it for the money. I don't make that much money, but what I do believe in is the National Park Service and our mission to protect these beautiful and insanely unique monuments to the rest of the world.
If they offered me my job back tomorrow, I would take it, despite all the chaos and risk. The mission is still there, and I'm still ready to be a part of it.
We're not deep state actors. We're not faceless bureaucrats. I'm a veteran that wants to help veterans. That's why people join the federal service. They do it to help others and serve their country. This is the face of the federal agencies.
You know, before I saw that video, I actually supported cutting government waste. I actually supported that. But now, after hearing these powerful stories, after hearing these powerful testaments to the meaning of public service, I realize I was just wrong. Government waste is good. Government spending is good. I don't think it should be cut anymore. In fact, I think it should be increased. These people have convinced me that government spending should be increased. I'm sorry, is that the reaction we're supposed to have? Maybe it's just because I'm a heartless sociopath, but to me this video is just an egregious example, the most egregious example I've seen in a really long time, of emotional blackmail propaganda. This is just as in-your-face, weepy sob story as it gets. And for those listeners of mine who aren't sociopaths, you might be tempted to feel sorry for these people. You might be tempted to feel uncomfortable about DOGE firing all these bureaucrats. You might be reconsidering whether Elon Musk firing these people and trying to cut government spending is really a good thing. But you shouldn't for two reasons. One, the media might be crying a lot of crocodile tears for these bureaucrats who will now have to find a job in the private sector doing something other than wasting your money. But the media, this same media, never pretended to care when millions of innocent people working jobs that were actually productive and useful and necessary to society. We're talking firemen, policemen, construction workers, people who actually build stuff and keep their communities safe. The media never pretended to care when those people were purged from the workforce by the millions because they refused to inject themselves with Fauci's experimental COVID drug. The media never cared about them. In fact, much the opposite. They slandered them as conspiracy theorists and radicals and grandma killers who were selfishly risking the lives of vulnerable people by not taking the drug. I refuse to call it a vaccine because it wasn't a vaccine. It didn't work. And I know people whose jobs were destroyed and whose only source of money was ruthlessly cut off. You probably do too, because there were millions of these people. You might even be one of them, listening to this years after the fact. So now the media is turning around and demanding the sympathy of the same people they relentlessly demonized for years, people whose faces they spat in when their careers were destroyed, people who they tried to shame and turn into pariahs. They're demanding that these people who had to put up with all of that feel sorry for this guy who cleaned up garbage at the National Park Service, which nothing against that guy. Nothing against that guy. But we need to cut government spending, and we can't let ourselves be manipulated like this. And the media, of course, they couldn't care less about anyone losing jobs. They couldn't. You think they care? You think they're up at night bothered that these people are losing jobs, the media? People in the media, you think the pundits that's what they're worried about? Of course they're not. All they care about is advancing their own ideological agenda and protecting their power and their interests. We normal people have souls. It's our natural reaction to feel sorry for these people, for many of us. The media doesn't, so they're trying to use that fact against us. They're trying to weaponize our empathy and our compassion against us. Don't fall for it. Don't let them win. Here's the second reason why you shouldn't let any of this move you an inch. And this is the reason that you'll rarely hear anyone talking about, which is that firing bureaucrats does not kill any jobs. There's this quote from Henry Hazlitt, an Austrian economist, that's really important and critical for everyone to understand. This is a point that everyone needs to know. The government can't give you anything it didn't first take from someone else. The government can't give you anything it didn't first take from someone else. All of the money the government spends, every single dollar, doesn't matter what it's spent on, it's stolen from you, from the taxpayer. It's either paid for by directly taking it from your paycheck through the income tax, or taken in other ways through other taxes. We talked about the income tax in particular last week. Or it's paid for indirectly through the inflation tax, which is to say, it's paid for by the government stealing the value from the money you've already earned by printing so many dollars. And that raises the prices of groceries and gas and all that and makes your life much harder. All government spending is essentially a tax. All of it must be paid for through taxes and inflation, or from borrowing the money, which just means the government needs to tax and inflate later on down the road, plus tax and inflate for all the interest they have to pay. So that means that all of these jobs that these bureaucrats are losing are stolen jobs. Their paycheck was stolen money taken from taxpayers, taken from you. Every job the government creates, quote unquote, is a job that it stole from the free market, because all the money it pays any given bureaucrat is money that can no longer be used to pay an employee somewhere else. It's money that can no longer be used to hire the new employee you need for your business. It's money that can no longer be used for a new kid to get a job just trying to start out in life. It's money that can no longer be used for any of those things. So DOGE isn't killing jobs by firing bureaucrats. It's stopping jobs from being stolen. Every dollar of spending it cuts, every paycheck the government stops paying, is a dollar or a paycheck that is being returned to the free market where it belongs. Elon Musk and Doge and the Trump administration are essentially moving jobs from the public sector into the private sector, from the control of the government into the control of people like you, into the control of individuals. And yes, it will be painful for these particular people. It will be painful to be fired. No one likes getting fired. But it's a fact of life that most of us have had to deal with or will have to deal with at one point or another. If we're working for a company, any company, and our boss decides our services are no longer worth the money he's giving us, he'll fire us. We can cry all we want about it, but that's how life works. And I would like it if Trump and Musk could stretch out their hands and magically shrink the government in this completely painless process where no one would like to get fired. I would like that in the same sense that I would like it if there was no starvation or hunger or war in the world. But we have to live in reality. When you live under the most powerful government and military empire in the history of the world, which is what the United States government is, the process of shrinking that government will never be painless. And notice this is very important. You will rarely hear the left talking about how necessary all these people were to the government, about how they were doing this super important thing, and the government will be seriously damaged because they're no longer there to do that thing. You'll never hear them talking about that. Instead, you'll just hear them crying crocodile tears about all the jobs that are going to be lost. Which, ironically, for the left, just proves Doge and Elon Musk right. If the best argument for keeping these bureaucrats on the payroll is that otherwise they will lose their jobs, and the best argument is not that they provide some essential service that taxpayers need to live in a healthy society, then they absolutely need to be fired. Because the only government job that is ever justified is a job that is necessary to provide an essential service to taxpayers. The government isn't supposed to be some massive jobs program where it hands out careers like Halloween candy, careers paid for by money it took from other people. As we already discussed, it can't give anyone anything it didn't first take from someone else. The second narrative, the second lie that the media is pushing, is that Elon Musk doesn't have any legitimate power because he wasn't elected. The left has used this argument time and time again to take Doge to court and claim it violates the Constitution. Activist judges across the country, appointed by Biden, appointed by Obama, appointed by Clinton, have used this lie to try to stop Doge from ever getting anything done. The media has even ran dramatic headlines about how Elon Musk and Donald Trump are creating a constitutional crisis by carrying out their dastardly plan to save taxpayers' money. There are multiple reasons that that is stupid and hypocritical. Since when has the media pretended to care about unelected bureaucrats? For all their screaming about Elon Musk wielding too much power since he's an unelected employee, where were they during COVID? Where were they when unelected deep state supervillain Anthony Fauci and the CDC and the NIH mandated that everyone get the experimental shot or lose their jobs and careers, like we just talked about a few minutes ago? Where were they when the bureaucrats shut down the entire economy, locking kids out of schools and people out of work? Where were they when bureaucrats and the intelligence agencies worked hand in glove with big tech to censor anyone who dared bring up the Hunter Biden laptop story in the 2020 election? Where were they when unelected bureaucrats at the FBI raided the homes of peaceful pro-life activists, the activists Trump just pardoned, and hauled away a father of 11 children to prison for the crime of praying outside an abortion mill? Where were they when they did all that? Oh yeah, that's right, they were cheering it all on. They were cheering on from the sidelines as unelected bureaucrats did all these insane authoritarian things. Clearly, these people could not care less about unelected bureaucrats having too much power. They didn't care when all of this happened, they supported it. It's only when a government employee like Elon Musk has the radical idea that maybe we shouldn't be lighting money on fire that these people pretend to care about the Constitution. Yes, there is a constitutional crisis in the United States, but Elon Musk and Donald Trump didn't start it. It's a crisis that's been unfolding for a century as this unconstitutional fourth branch of government, made up of unelected elites who aren't term limited and have insane protections where many of them can't even be fired. It's a constitutional crisis that's been caused by that branch stealing the power of the president, stealing the power of Congress, and in doing so, stealing the power of the people. Elon Musk and Doge and Donald Trump are trying to resolve this constitutional crisis. They're trying to restore power back to the people. They're trying to restore constitutional government back to the United States. This is a battle over whether the people are sovereign or whether the bureaucracy is sovereign. This is a battle over whether the people have a say in how the government is run or not. And this is a battle that, whether the media likes it or not, the elites are losing, and the people are winning. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Conservative Rebel. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and follow the show. I'll see you on the next episode.